Tonight we're going on a journey together. A journey into the past, into a world that Hollywood has painted with broad strokes of glory and honor, but which held a far different reality. Before we begin, get comfortable. Adjust your pillows, settle into your blankets, and let yourself relax. This is your time to unwind, to let go of the day's tensions, and to drift into a peaceful rest as we explore the true nature of medieval warfare. If you enjoy these journeys through history, a gentle like and subscribe helps others find this peaceful corner of the internet, and perhaps leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from tonight. It's always wonderful to know we're all connected, across continents and time zones, sharing these quiet moments together. Now, dim the lights if you haven't already. Let the outside world fade away, and let's step back in time. Back to an era when the clash of steel was real, when battles were fought not by professional soldiers seeking glory, but by ordinary people, farmers, craftsmen, fathers and sons, who found themselves thrust into circumstances beyond their control or understanding. Close your eyes if you'd like, or simply let your gaze soften. Breathe deeply, and let us begin. Imagine, if you will, that you are a farmer. Your name is William, perhaps, or John, or Thomas, a common name for a common man in medieval England. It's a spring morning, and the air carries that fresh scent of turned earth and new growth. You're 30 years old, which in medieval terms means you're in the prime of your life, though your body already shows the wear of hard labor. You have a wife. Let's call her Margaret. She's a strong woman, weathered by work but still young enough to bear children. You have 3 of them, 2 boys and a girl. The eldest is 8, already helping in the fields. The youngest is still nursing. Your home is modest. A single-room cottage with walls of wattle and daub, a thatched roof that needs mending every few years, and a dirt floor covered with rushes. There's a small garden where Margaret grows vegetables, onions, leeks, cabbage. You have a pig, some chickens, and if fortune has smiled upon you, perhaps a cow. The 10 acres of land you work aren't yours, of course. They belong to the lord whose manor sits on the hill overlooking the village. You work those acres in exchange for the right to live on them, to feed your family from them. It's an arrangement that stretches back generations, binding you to the land and the land to the lord who owns it. This particular morning, you're preparing for planting. The frost has finally released its grip on the earth, and the soil is ready to receive seeds. Miss this planting season and your family will face hunger next winter. It's that simple. The margin between survival and starvation is measured in successful harvests, and you cannot afford to miss even one. Then you hear it, the sound that changes everything. Hoofbeats on the village road. The jingle of harnesses, voices raised in authority. Your stomach tightens with instinct before your mind has even processed what these sounds mean. Margaret looks up from the hearth where she's been stirring porridge. Your eldest son, who was playing near the door, goes silent. The knock, when it comes, is not tentative. It's the sharp, demanding rap of someone who expects immediate obedience. You open the door to find the bailiff, a man you've known your entire life. The lord's representative in village matters, accompanied by 2 men-at-arms carrying spears and wearing simple leather armor. The bailiff holds a rolled parchment. He doesn't meet your eyes as he speaks. William, son of John, you are called to military service by order of Lord Edmund, who serves at the pleasure of His Majesty the King. You will present yourself at the assembly point in 3 days' time, bringing such weapons as you possess. Failure to appear will be considered desertion, punishable by forfeiture of property and execution. The words wash over you like cold water. 3 days. Military service. The planting season is just beginning. Your family needs you. The children need you. Margaret cannot possibly manage the planting, the livestock, and 3 children alone. None of it matters. I have crops to plant, you hear yourself saying, though even as the words leave your mouth you know how futile they are. The bailiff's expression doesn't change. He's had this conversation already today, and he'll have it again before nightfall. 3 days, he repeats. The assembly point at Smithfield. Bring a weapon, a billhook, a spear, whatever you have. You'll be provided further instruction there. And then they're moving to the next house to deliver the same message to your neighbor, and the neighbor beyond that. You stand in your doorway watching them go, feeling the weight of inevitability settling over your shoulders like a yoke. Margaret doesn't cry, not immediately. She's too practical for that. How long? She asks. You don't know. Weeks, months. The wars between England and France have been dragging on for what feels like forever. Your father fought in them and his father before him. Some men return after a few months. Others never return at all. That night you lie awake beside Margaret, listening to her breathe, listening to your children's soft snores from their corner of the room. You think about the planting that won't get done, about the pig that needs slaughtering before winter, about all the small but essential tasks that keep a family alive in medieval England. You think about war. Not the glorious kind you've heard about in the songs traveling minstrels sometimes perform in the village square. You think about old Thomas, who lost 3 fingers at some battle whose name he could never remember. You think about Margaret's brother, who went to war 5 years ago and never came back. You think about the scars you've seen on men who survived, the limps, the missing eyes, the haunted expressions that never quite go away. 3 days. You have 3 days before your life as you know it ends. You spend those days frantically trying to prepare. You sharpen your billhook, a farming tool with a curved blade meant for cutting brush, but which can serve as a weapon in desperate times. It's not much, but it's all you have. Your grandfather's old sword, if it ever existed, was sold long ago to pay taxes during a bad harvest year. You build up the woodpile. You repair the fence around the vegetable garden. You try to show your eldest son how to do the work you've always done, knowing even as you demonstrate that an 8-year-old boy cannot possibly fill a grown man's role. You give Margaret what little coin you have saved, a few pennies hidden in a leather pouch. It won't last long. On the morning of the 3rd day, you embrace your wife and children. Your daughter clings to your leg, not understanding why you're leaving. Your sons try to be brave, their little faces set in serious expressions that make your heart break. Margaret's eyes are dry, but you can see the fear in them. "Come back," she whispers against your chest. "I will, you promise." Though you both know this is a promise you may not be able to keep. The walk to Smithfield takes most of the morning. You're not alone. Men from your village and from villages beyond are all walking the same road, all answering the same summons. Some are young, boys barely old enough to grow beards. Others are older, gray-haired men who should be spending their remaining years teaching grandchildren, not marching to war. You recognize some faces. There's Peter the miller's son, looking terrified. There's Hugh from the next village over, a massive man who works as a blacksmith. There's Father Benedict's nephew, whose name you can't remember. All of you are walking toward the same uncertain fate. The assembly point is chaos. Hundreds of men are gathering in the field, perhaps 1,000 or more. Some arrive in organized groups, retinues brought by minor nobles. Others arrive alone or in small clusters, peasant levies like yourself. The noise is overwhelming. Shouted commands, the whinny of horses, the clang of metal equipment, hundreds of conversations happening simultaneously in a dozen different dialects and languages. You see knights on horseback, resplendent in real armor, chainmail that gleams in the sunlight, surcoats bearing heraldic symbols, proper weapons that haven't been sharpened from farming tools. They sit tall in their saddles, looking over the assembled peasants with expressions that range from indifference to barely concealed contempt. Sergeants are organizing the chaos, sorting men into groups more or less at random. You're assigned to a company of about 200 men. You recognize perhaps 5 of them from your village or the surrounding area. The rest are strangers who speak with accents you can barely understand. Your sergeant is a grizzled veteran with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. He looks you over with the practiced eye of someone assessing livestock. "You, farmer, you know which end of that billhook to stick in a Frenchman?" "Yes, sir," you reply, though you've never stuck it in anything more threatening than a particularly stubborn bramble bush. He grunts, unconvinced, and moves on to assess the next man. Food is distributed, hard bread and weak ale. It's not enough, but you eat it anyway, not knowing when the next meal will come. Around you, men are settling in for the night, finding spaces in the field to lay out thin blankets or simply curling up on the bare ground. As darkness falls and cooking fires dot the landscape, you find yourself sitting with a small group from your village. No one says much. What is there to say? You're all here against your will, all facing the same uncertain future. Someone begins to pray, the familiar words of the Pater Noster rising softly in the darkness. Others join in. The Latin phrases a comfort even if half the men don't fully understand their meaning. "Our Father who art in heaven." You pray too, adding your voice to the murmured chorus. You pray for your family, for protection, for the strength to survive whatever is coming. You pray for a quick return home, though in your heart you know this is unlikely. The stars wheel overhead, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere in the distance you hear someone crying quietly. A young man, probably missing his mother. No one comments on it. You all understand tomorrow the march begins. But tonight, for these last few hours, you can still almost pretend this isn't happening. You can close your eyes and imagine you're back in your cottage with Margaret warm beside you, and your children safely sleeping. You can pretend that tomorrow you'll wake to tend your fields, to live the ordinary life that has suddenly become an impossible luxury. But even as you drift into uneasy sleep, you know the truth. That life is gone. Everything familiar and safe has been left behind. And ahead lies only the road and whatever waits at its end. Rest now. Breathe deeply. Let the tension in your shoulders ease. The story continues, but for now, simply be here in this moment of transition between one life and another. Part 2. The March. The long road to battle. Morning comes with the harsh sound of horns and drums. You wake stiff and cold, your body protesting against the hard ground and the chill night air. Around you, hundreds of other men are stirring, coughing, groaning, relieving themselves at the edge of the field in areas that are already becoming foul with human waste. Breakfast is more hard bread and ale, the same as last night's supper, the same as every meal will be for weeks to come. Your stomach growls with hunger even as you chew the coarse bread which tastes of dirt and chaff. The ale at least provides some calories, though it's so weak it's barely more than water. The order comes to form up. The sergeants are shouting, physically shoving men into rough columns. There's no real organization. You simply find yourself standing in a mass of bodies, clutching your billhook, waiting for the column to start moving. When it does, the movement is lurching and uneven. 1,000 men trying to walk in the same direction creates a strange, stumbling rhythm. You fall into step with those around you, your feet automatically matching their pace. The first day of marching isn't terrible. Your body is still relatively fresh. The weather is mild. The road, such as it is dry. You walk perhaps 15 miles before the column stops for the night. Your feet hurt. Your shoes, thin leather affairs that you made yourself last autumn, are already beginning to show wear. But it's manageable. But the first day is always manageable. It's the days after that break you. By the third day, your feet have developed blisters. Large, fluid-filled bubbles on your heels and toes that burst when you walk, leaving raw, weeping wounds. Every step sends sharp pains shooting up your legs. The man beside you is limping badly. His blisters have become infected, his feet swollen and red. By the end of the first week, your shoes are falling apart. The stitching has come loose and the thin soles have worn through in places. You wrap them with strips torn from the hem of your tunic, but it's inadequate. You're essentially walking barefoot on medieval roads. Rutted rocky paths that shred the makeshift bandages and tear at your skin. The weather has turned. Spring in Northern Europe means rain, cold, persistent rain that soaks through your woolen clothing and never quite dries. Wet wool doesn't provide warmth. It pulls heat from your body instead. You walk in a state of constant, bone-deep chill, shivering even as you move. The landscape you're passing through is unfamiliar. Villages that look like your own but aren't. Fields worked by people who stopped their labor to watch the army pass, their expressions mixing fear and resentment. You're in England still, you think, but you've already walked farther from home than you've ever been in your life. Food remains inadequate. The daily ration of bread seems to shrink each day as supplies run low, and the quartermaster's corruption becomes more blatant. Sometimes there's a thin soup made from vegetables requisitioned from the villages you pass. Occasionally a bit of cheese or dried fish. Never enough. You're always hungry, your stomach a constant hollow ache. You begin to lose weight. Your belt, already drawn tight, has to be cinched tighter. Your tunic hangs loose on your frame. The physical labor of walking 15 to 20 miles a day while underfed is consuming your body's reserves. Around you, men are getting sick. Dysentery strikes first, the bloody flux caused by contaminated water and food. Men who contract it begin making frequent, desperate trips to the edges of the column, soiling themselves, growing weaker by the day. The smell is inescapable. You're marching through a miasma of unwashed bodies, infected wounds, and human waste. You watch men collapse. They'll be walking along, then suddenly their legs give out, and they crumple to the ground. Sometimes friends help them up. Sometimes they're left where they fall, the column stepping around them and moving on. You learn not to look back. Looking back means seeing men you've been marching beside for days lying motionless in the mud, and there's nothing you can do about it. The nights are worse than the days. When the column stops, you have perhaps an hour of daylight left to find a relatively dry spot. Gather whatever you can for warmth, and try to prepare for another uncomfortable night. There are no tents for common soldiers. You sleep on the ground using your thin blanket if you have one, or simply your cloak wrapped tight around you. The ground is always wet. You try to find elevated spots where water won't pool, but so does everyone else, and there aren't enough dry spots to go around. You end up lying in mud, feeling the cold wetness seep through your clothes, knowing that tomorrow you'll wake even more stiff and sore than today. Guard duty rotates through the company. When your turn comes, you spend the night standing watch, exhausted beyond measure, struggling to keep your eyes open and your attention on the darkness beyond the camp. You're supposed to be watching for enemy scouts or raiders, but mostly you're fighting the overwhelming desire to sit down, just for a moment, to close your eyes, just for a second. The sergeant's cuff to the side of your head brings you back to alertness. "Sleep on watch and I'll have you flogged," he snarls, and you believe him. You've seen men flogged for lesser offenses, tied to a wagon wheel and struck with leather straps until their backs are bloody ruins. Lice find you during the second week. Everyone has them. They live in the seams of your clothing, tiny insects that bite constantly, causing an itching so intense it becomes a form of torture. You scratch until you draw blood, which only creates openings for infection. At night, if you have a moment and a candle, you might try to pick the lice out of your clothes, crushing them between your thumbnails. But for every one you kill, there seem to be 100 more. The lice carry typhus, though you don't know that. You only know that some men develop terrible fevers, breaking out in rashes, becoming delirious. They rave about things that aren't there, calling for mothers and wives. Most of them die within a week of the first symptoms. You pass through villages and towns, and the locals regard you with fear and hostility. Armies, even friendly armies, bring nothing good. They requisition food that can't be spared. They steal. They break things. They bring disease. Village doors close as you approach. Valuable items are hidden. Young women are kept indoors. Sometimes the army camps near a town and men are given a few hours of freedom. Some find taverns and spend precious coins on ale that actually has some strength to it. Others seek out women, prostitutes who follow the army, or local women desperate enough to trade their bodies for coins. You think about Margaret and stay in camp, trying to rest, trying to conserve your dwindling energy. You've been marching for 3 weeks now, maybe 4. Time has become fluid, each day bleeding into the next with nothing to distinguish them except gradually accumulating misery. You've crossed into France. You know this because the language the locals speak is completely incomprehensible now, and the sergeants have warned everyone about hostile locals. Your feet are a disaster. The soles are calloused and cracked, bleeding at the heel where no amount of padding seems to help. Your shoes are long gone, fallen apart completely. You're walking barefoot now like many others. Each step on the rocky road is agony, but stopping isn't an option. Stop walking and you'll be left behind. Being left behind means death, from exposure, from bandits, from starvation, or from hostile locals who have no love for English soldiers. You've learned to recognize the signs of serious illness. The 1,000-yard stare of someone whose mind has retreated from the horror of their situation. The gray pallor of skin that indicates fatal dysentery. The smell of gangrene, sweet and putrid, that emanates from wounds that have gone bad. A man you've been walking beside for 2 weeks, Robert, from a village 10 miles north of yours, develops a cough. Within 3 days, he's coughing up blood. Within a week, he's dead, his body left beside the road with dozens of others who didn't survive the march. You've stopped thinking about home in concrete terms. Margaret and the children have become dreamlike, figures from another life that seems increasingly unreal. Your world has narrowed to the immediate. The pain in your feet, the hunger in your belly, the exhaustion that makes every step a triumph of will over body. Rumors spread through the column like wildfire. The French army is just ahead. No, it's days away. We'll be fighting tomorrow. No, we'll be marching for another week. The king is leading us personally. No, the king is back in England and we're being led by some lesser noble. We're winning the war. We're losing. Peace negotiations are underway. This will all be over soon. No one knows which rumors are true, if any of them are. The common soldiers are told nothing by the commanders. Information trickles down through layers of hierarchy, becoming distorted and unreliable in the process. You march because you're ordered to march. You'll fight when you're ordered to fight. Your opinion is not requested. After 5 weeks, the character of the march changes. The column stops more frequently. Scouts ride out and return with increasing frequency. The knights check their equipment more carefully. The sergeants become more vigilant, less tolerant of disorder in the ranks. You're getting close to wherever you're going. The realization brings not relief, but a new species of terror. The march has been terrible, but at least during the march you weren't being actively attacked. Battle, actual combat with an enemy trying to kill you, looms ahead like a dark cloud on the horizon. You check your billhook for the 100th time. The edge has been maintained as well as you can manage. You've been sharpening it with a stone whenever there's time. The wooden shaft is solid. It's not much of a weapon, but it's all you have. That night, the camp has a different atmosphere. Men are quieter, more introspective. Some pray openly, rosary beads moving through their fingers as they murmur decades of the Hail Mary. Others write letters, dictating to the few literate men in the company. Messages for families they may never see again. You don't write a letter. What would you say? That you love them? They know that. That you're sorry? For what? For being conscripted against your will? That you'll try to survive? Of course you will. Instead, you sit in the gathering darkness listening to the sounds of the camp, the low murmur of voices, the crackle of cooking fires, the distant whinny of horses, the sound of men being sick, coughing, crying quietly when they think no one is listening. Tomorrow, or perhaps the day after, you'll see the enemy. You'll stand in a formation with other terrified men and wait for violence to crash over you like a wave. But for now, for this evening, you're still alive. You're still you. The battle hasn't happened yet, which means you haven't died yet, which means there's still hope. You lie down on the cold ground, wrap your threadbare blanket around yourself, and try to find sleep. It comes eventually, troubled and fragmentary, filled with dreams of home that fade like morning mist when you wake. Rest now. Let your breathing slow. Feel the tension leaving your body. The march continues, but for this moment simply exist in the quiet between what was and what will be. Part 3. The eve of battle, the last night. The word spreads through camp like a cold wind. The enemy has been sighted. The French army is less than 10 miles away, encamped in a position they've chosen, waiting for you to come to them. Tomorrow at dawn, both armies will march toward each other. By midday, the battle will begin. This is real now, inescapable and immediate. The camp transforms as night falls. What had been a place of weary routine becomes something else, a place where thousands of men confront their own mortality. The priests are overwhelmed with requests for confession. Lines form outside their tents, men waiting sometimes for hours for their turn to whisper their sins and receive absolution. When your turn comes, you kneel before Father William, a round-faced priest from somewhere in the Midlands. In the dim candlelight of his tent, you confess the usual sins. Harsh words spoken to your wife in anger. A neighbor's tool you borrowed and forgot to return. Lustful thoughts about the widow 3 houses down from yours. Small sins, the normal transgressions of ordinary life. Do you have hatred in your heart for the French? The priest asks. You consider this honestly. No, Father. I don't know any French people. Tomorrow you may kill them. Yes, Father. That is not a sin, he says gently. You fight in a just war, at the command of your rightful Lord. To kill in such circumstances is not murder in the eyes of God. You want to believe this. You're not sure you do. How can it be righteous to kill men you don't know, who've done you no personal harm simply because someone in power has declared it must be so? But you keep this doubt to yourself. What good would voicing it do? Say 10 paternosters and 5 Ave Marias, the priest intones. Ego te absolvo a peccatis tuis. The Latin words of absolution wash over you. Your sins are forgiven. If you die tomorrow, your soul is clean. This is supposed to be a comfort. Outside the priest's tent, you join a larger group gathering for Mass. Thousands of men kneel in the muddy field as the priests elevate the host, speaking the words that transform bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. You receive communion with the others, the thin wafer dissolving on your tongue. The sermon that follows is rousing in its way. The priest speaks of duty, of honor, of the righteousness of your cause. He invokes St. George, England's patron saint, and promises that angels will watch over you in battle. He reminds you that to die fighting for your king is a noble death, one that will be rewarded in heaven. You listen, wanting to be moved, wanting to feel the courage and conviction the words are meant to inspire. What you actually feel is tired, scared, and very far from home. After Mass, you return to your section of camp. Some men are trying to eat, forcing down food their nervous stomachs don't want. Others are checking their equipment compulsively, testing blade edges, adjusting straps, counting arrows if they're archers. Hugh, the blacksmith from a neighboring village, sits beside you. He's a massive man, strong from years of working the forge, and he looks terrified. "Do you think it hurts?" he asks quietly. "Dying, I mean. I don't know," you admit. "Old Thomas from our village took a sword cut that near took his arm off. He said the pain didn't hit until later, that at first he just felt cold." Hugh nods slowly. "I keep thinking about my children. I have 5 of them, you know. The youngest is only 2. He won't remember me if I don't come back. You don't know what to say to this, so you say nothing. What comfort could words possibly provide? His fear is rational, justified. He might die tomorrow. His children might grow up fatherless. These are real possibilities, not phantoms to be dispelled with empty reassurances. Around you, other conversations are happening. Some men are praying continuously, their voices a low murmur in the darkness. Others are trying to make jokes, laughing too loudly at things that aren't funny, desperate to break the tension. A few are crying, unable to contain their terror any longer. You notice young Peter, the miller's son from your village who can't be more than 17, sitting alone, his face pale in the firelight. You go to sit beside him. "How are you managing, lad?" He looks at you with eyes that are too wide, too bright. "I keep thinking I'm going to shame myself tomorrow, that I'll piss myself or run away when the fighting starts." Every man here is thinking the same thing, you tell him, and it's true. The ones who aren't scared are either fools or liars. Being afraid doesn't make you a coward. Running away makes you a coward, and I don't think you'll run. How do you know? You don't, of course. Young Peter might very well run, and you wouldn't blame him if he did. But he needs to hear something that isn't his own fear. Because you're your father's son, and your father is a good man. That counts for something. It's a small comfort, but you see him straighten slightly, his shoulders squaring. Sometimes that's all anyone can offer. Small comforts in the face of overwhelming terror. The knights and nobles are having their own rituals. You can see them in their section of camp, attended by squires who help them into their armor. The process of armoring a knight takes time. Layers of padding, then mail, then plate on top of that. They look like something from another world, these armored men on their massive horses. A few of them ride through the common soldiers' area, their horses' hooves squelching in the mud. They're meant to inspire confidence, you suppose. Look at your protectors, your betters ready to lead you into battle. Mostly, they just remind you of the vast gulf between your world and theirs. They have real armor that might actually stop a blade. You have a padded jacket that won't. As full darkness falls, some men try to sleep. It's a futile effort for most. How can you sleep when tomorrow might be your last day alive? But exhaustion is powerful, and here and there you see men who've managed to drift off, their faces slack in unconsciousness. You don't even try to sleep. Instead, you sit with your back against a supply wagon looking up at the stars. They're remarkably clear tonight, undimmed by any artificial light. The same stars that shine over your village, over Margaret and the children. You wonder if they're looking at these same stars. Wondering if you're alive, if you're well, if you'll ever come home. A memory comes to you, unbidden and vivid, a summer evening 2 years ago after a successful harvest. You and Margaret sitting outside your cottage, watching the children play in the last light of day. She was laughing at something one of them said, her face golden in the sunset, and you felt a contentment so complete it seemed to fill your entire body. That moment is impossibly distant now, separated from this cold field in France by more than miles and months. It exists in a different world, a world where you were simply a farmer, living a simple life, untroubled by war or violence or the fear of imminent death. You would give anything, everything to be back in that moment. Around midnight, there's a disturbance. A man has been caught trying to desert, sneaking away from camp, heading for the woods at the perimeter. The sergeants drag him back, and there's a quick, brutal punishment. He's flogged in front of everyone who's still awake, his screams echoing across the camp. 30 lashes with a leather strap that leaves his back a ruin of torn flesh. The message is clear. Desertion will not be tolerated. If you run, you'll be caught and punished. The only way forward is through the battle. After the flogging, the camp grows quieter. Men retreat into themselves, into their own thoughts and fears. The hours crawl by with agonizing slowness. Midnight passes. 1 o'clock. 2. You find yourself counting the hours until dawn, simultaneously dreading its arrival and wanting it to come so this waiting will end. Around 3 in the morning, something shifts. It's subtle, barely noticeable, but you feel it. The psychological transition from night to approaching day. Men begin stirring, unable to remain still any longer. Equipment is checked yet again. Weapons are tested one more time. Prayers are murmured. The eastern sky begins to lighten almost imperceptibly at first. Black fades to deep blue, then to a lighter blue tinged with gray. The stars disappear one by one, their ancient light dimming in the face of dawn. This is it. The last moments before everything changes. Horns sound across the camp, their brassy notes cutting through the cold morning air. The call to arms. The order to form up. The beginning of the end, or perhaps just the end. You stand, your body protesting after a sleepless night on cold ground. Around you, thousands of other men are doing the same, each one carrying his own burden of fear, his own desperate hope for survival. Hugh looks at you, his broad face drawn and pale. "God be with you," he says. And with you, you reply, "There's nothing else to say." You grip your billhook, feel its familiar weight in your hands, and move toward the assembly area where the sergeants are already shouting orders, organizing chaos into something resembling military formation. The battle is coming. But for now, for these last few moments of peace, breathe deeply. Feel the morning air in your lungs. Know that whatever happens today, you have survived to see this dawn. That is something. That is enough. Rest in this moment between night and day, between peace and violence, between the life you knew and the life that awaits. Part 4. The Battle. When Worlds Collide. The formation is finally taking shape, though calling it a formation is generous. You're standing in a mass of humanity, pressed shoulder to shoulder with men you barely know, arranged in rough ranks that stretch for hundreds of yards. The professional soldiers, the men-at-arms, are at the front and flanks where actual skill might matter. You and the other peasant levies fill the center, adding weight and numbers to the line. You can see your breath in the cold morning air. Despite the chill, you're sweating, your heart hammering against your ribs in a rhythm that has nothing to do with physical exertion and everything to do with raw fear. The sergeants walk behind the formation, weapons ready, ensuring no one tries to slip away. Their job is to keep you in position by force if necessary. You're boxed in, enemy ahead, enforcers behind, pressed tight by the men on either side. Your billhook feels inadequate in your hands. It's a farming tool designed for cutting brush, not for fighting armored soldiers. But it's all you have, so you grip it tighter, knuckles white, and try to remember the minimal training you received. Keep the point toward the enemy, stay in formation, don't break the line. Across the field, perhaps 400 yards distant, the French army is forming their own line. From this distance, they look like a dark smudge against the landscape, a writhing mass of men and horses. You can't see individual faces yet, just the movement of thousands of bodies organizing for battle. The standards and banners are raised on both sides. Your side's flags show the royal arms of England, the quartered lions and fleur-de-lis that symbolize claimed dominion over both kingdoms. The French banners display their own royal symbols, blue and gold rippling in the morning breeze. Drums begin their steady beat. Boom, boom, boom. The rhythm is meant to keep the formation moving in sync, but it also sounds like the heartbeat of some enormous beast. The sound reverberates through your chest, merging with your own racing pulse. A priest on horseback rides along the line, holding up a crucifix, calling out blessings in Latin. Dominus vobiscum, the Lord be with you. Some men cross themselves. Others stare straight ahead, their faces blank masks. The order comes to advance. The line lurches forward, thousands of men trying to walk in unison. It's immediately obvious this isn't going to be orderly. The ground is uneven, churned by previous armies, pocked with holes and scattered with rocks. Men stumble, catch themselves, press forward. You walk slowly toward the enemy. Each step takes you closer to violence, closer to death or survival, though you don't know which. The distance closes with agonizing slowness. 400 yards becomes 350, then 300. You can see them more clearly now. Individual soldiers in the French formation. Men who look surprisingly similar to the men you're walking beside. Scared faces, weapons gripped too tight. The same desperate hope for survival. At 300 yards, the archers begin their work. If your army has longbowmen, and English armies usually do, they step forward from the formation and begin to loose. The sound is distinctive, hundreds of bowstrings releasing simultaneously, a massive exhalation of potential energy becoming kinetic. The arrows arc into the sky, a dark cloud rising and then falling toward the enemy formation. From this distance, you can see the impact. The French line wavers as the missiles strike home. Men fall. Screams carry across the field, faint but audible. Then their archers return fire. You watch the arrows rise from their line, climbing into the morning sky. For a moment, they seem to hang suspended, a deadly flock of birds. Then gravity takes hold and they begin to descend. Toward you. The sound they make, a hissing, rushing sound like wind through trees, grows louder as they approach. Men raise shields if they have them. Those without shields can only duck their heads and hope. The arrows arrive with a sound like hailstones hitting a roof, but irregular, chaotic. Thunk, 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 thunk. Each impact is an arrow striking shield. Ground armor or flesh. 3 men ahead of you are hit. One takes an arrow through the shoulder, the bodkin point punching through his padded jacket and into the muscle beneath. He screams and falls to his knees, hands grasping at the shaft. Another is struck in the thigh, the arrow embedding deep into his leg. He collapses and the men behind have to step around him to keep the formation moving. A third arrow takes someone through the throat. You see it happen. See the shaft suddenly protruding from both sides of his neck. See him make that horrible gurgling sound as blood fills his windpipe. He falls face first into the mud and goes still. The formation keeps advancing. You step over the fallen, trying not to look at their faces, trying not to think about the fact that you could be next. More arrows fall. More men scream and drop. The line begins to waver, gaps opening where men have fallen or where survivors are clustering behind shields or other bodies for protection. The sergeants are screaming, "Keep moving! Close the gaps! Forward, you bastards, forward!" 200 yards now. You can see the French soldiers clearly, their faces, their equipment, the fear in their expressions that probably mirrors your own. 150 yards. The arrow volleys continue from both sides. The sky is periodically darkened by flights of missiles. The ground between the armies is littered with the dead and dying, men who fell during the advance lying in crumpled heaps or writhing in agony. 100 yards. The drumbeat intensifies. Both armies are shouting now, battle cries, prayers, curses, a rising roar of human voices trying to build courage, trying to drown out fear. 80 yards, 60, 50. The archers stop shooting. Too close now, risk of hitting their own side. The sudden absence of arrow fall is almost more unnerving than the volleys were. Now there's nothing between you and them except rapidly diminishing distance. 40 yards, 30. You can see individual details now, a man with a thick beard, another missing teeth, someone wearing a dented helmet that's too large for his head. The front ranks lower their spears, creating a bristling hedge of points. You're not in the front rank, you're 3 or 4 men back, but you can see what's coming, what's about to happen. 20 yards, 15. Both lines are moving faster now, the walk becoming a jog, then a run. The noise is overwhelming, thousands of voices screaming, feet thundering on the ground, weapons rattling, a crescendo of sound that drowns out thought. 10 yards, 5, 3. And then, with a sound like the world ending, the two formations collide. The impact is indescribable. It's not like 2 armies meeting. It's like 2 avalanches crashing together. Thousands of pounds of human mass slamming into each other at running speed. The sound is part crunch, part scream, part something worse. The sound of bodies breaking, of spears punching through flesh, of shields splintering, of men being crushed. You're in the 3rd or 4th rank, and the collision hits you like a physical blow even though you're not at the very front. The men ahead of you stop suddenly as they crash into the enemy line and you slam into them from behind. Everyone behind you crashes into you. Suddenly, you're compressed between layers of humanity, unable to move, barely able to breathe. This is medieval melee combat, not the dueling of Hollywood films, but a brutal shoving match where thousands of men push from both sides and the soldiers caught in the middle are crushed, stabbed, or suffocated. The pressure is incredible. You're squeezed between the bodies around you, your ribs compressing with each breath becoming a struggle. The man directly in front of you is pressed so tightly against you that you can feel his spine through his clothing. You can smell his fear sweat, can hear his labored breathing, can feel every twitch and movement as he tries to use his weapon against enemies you can't even see. The front rank is dying. You can't see it, but you can hear it. Screams that rise above the general roar. Wet sounds that might be blades entering bodies. The heavy thump of bodies falling. Men at the very front are being stabbed, crushed, trampled. Their deaths create small spaces that are immediately filled by men from the rank behind, who then die in turn. You thrust your billhook forward, over the shoulder of the man in front of you, into the mass of enemy bodies. You're not aiming at anything specific, there's no room to aim. You're just pushing the blade forward into the writhing press of humanity, hoping to hit something vital. The blade catches resistance. You feel it through the wooden shaft. The point has hit something. Fabric, you think, maybe flesh. You push harder and the resistance increases, then suddenly gives way. The billhook slides forward another 6 inches before stopping against something solid. Bone, probably. Someone on the other side screams. Whether from your blow or someone else's, you can't tell. You try to pull the billhook back, but it's stuck. Caught in whatever you hit. You twist it, yank it, finally feel it pull free. The blade comes back covered in blood that isn't yours. You've just wounded or killed someone, a person. A man who woke up this morning like you did. Who probably has a family like you do. Who was terrified like you are. The thought tries to surface, but there's no time for it. No space in your mind for anything except the immediate struggle to survive. Something strikes your side. A spear or sword glancing off the padded jacket you're wearing. The impact drives the air from your lungs and sends a spike of pain through your ribs. The padding absorbed most of the blow, but you felt it. Felt how close that came to being a killing strike. The pushing continues. Your side pushes forward, gains perhaps a foot of ground. Then the French push back and you lose 2 feet. Back and forth, inches at a time. Thousands of men straining against thousands of other men. And the soldiers at the contact point are being ground to pieces. The man directly in front of you takes a spear thrust that you see happen. The point comes from somewhere in the French formation, threading through the chaos and strikes him in the upper chest. It doesn't go deep. His padded jacket stops the worst of it, but he gasps in pain and stumbles backward, pressing into you. You try to support him, but there's nowhere for him to go. The mass of men behind prevents any backward movement. He's pinned in place, wounded and vulnerable. Another thrust, this one from a different angle, catches him in the neck. Blood sprays hot and wet across your face. He makes a horrible choking sound and goes limp. But his body doesn't fall. It can't. The pressure of the men around him holds him upright, and you're pushing against a corpse. Time becomes meaningless. Are you fighting for minutes? Hours? Impossible to tell. Every moment stretches into eternity. Every second you survive feels like a small miracle. Your arms ache from wielding the billhook. Your legs tremble from maintaining position, from pushing forward against the immense pressure. Your lungs burn from breathing air that's thick with dust and blood and the stench of opened bodies. The ground beneath your feet is no longer solid earth. It's become a nightmare surface. Mud mixed with blood, creating a slurry the color of liver and the consistency of grease. Bodies cover the ground, creating a carpet of dead and dying men that you're standing on, walking on, fighting on. Your footing is treacherous. Every step might land on a body that shifts underneath you, threatening to send you falling. And falling in this press means being trampled to death. You step on someone's hand and feel the bones break under your boot. You can't even look down to see whose hand it is, enemy or ally, living or dead. There's no way to know and no way that it matters. Stopping means dying, so you keep moving, keep pushing, keep thrusting your weapon into the mass of enemies ahead. A French soldier's face appears in front of you, gap in the press of bodies. He's perhaps 20 years old. Terror written across his features, mouth open in a scream you can't hear over the general noise. He thrusts a spear toward you. You knock it aside with your billhook, mostly luck, not skill, and the curved blade of your weapon catches him across the face. Not a deep cut, but enough to open his cheek from ear to chin. He reels backward, blood streaming, and disappears back into the mass of men. Another impact, this one to your left shoulder. Something heavy, an axe maybe, strikes the padding you've stuffed into your jacket. The blow is hard enough to numb your entire arm for several seconds. When the feeling returns, it comes with pain, sharp and deep, radiating from your shoulder down to your fingertips. You've been hurt, but you're still functional. The padding saved you from worse. You're vaguely aware that your formation is holding. Neither side is breaking yet. Both armies are locked together in this brutal grinding match, men dying at the contact point while those behind keep pushing, feeding fresh bodies into the killing zone. Somewhere to your right, you hear a different sound, the thunder of hooves, cavalry. Knights on horseback crashing into one flank or the other. You can't see it, can't turn to look, can only hear the screams that mark the cavalry's passage and hope they're hitting the French and not you. An hour passes, maybe more. The fighting doesn't stop, doesn't even slow. It's continuous, relentless, exhausting beyond anything you've ever experienced. Your body is running on pure adrenaline, every rational thought subsumed by the animal need to survive. And then, something shifts. It's subtle at first, a change in the pressure, a different quality to the sounds around you. The push from the French side lessens slightly. Not much, but enough to notice. Your side pushes forward, gains a few feet of ground, and the enemy doesn't immediately push back. Someone shouts, "They're breaking! They're breaking!" You don't know if it's true, but the words ripple through your formation like electricity. Men who were on the edge of collapse suddenly find renewed energy. The push forward intensifies. The French line begins to waver more noticeably. Then, like a dam bursting, they break. The French formation dissolves into chaos. Men at the back turn and run. Those at the front try to disengage, to pull back from the melee. But the momentum is wrong, and they're caught between the urge to flee and the forward pressure of your side. They're exposed, vulnerable, and the killing intensifies. This is the root, the most dangerous part of any medieval battle. Not for those doing the pursuing, but certainly for those being pursued. Your formation, which had been locked in place, suddenly lurches forward as the resistance disappears. Men who've been pushing with all their strength against an immovable object suddenly find empty space ahead. Some stumble, others fall. The formation breaks apart into smaller groups and individual soldiers, all chasing fleeing enemies. The discipline that held you together evaporates. Now it's a hunt, a running slaughter, and every man is acting on his own initiative. You find yourself running forward with Hugh and young Peter, chasing French soldiers who are fleeing across the field. Your legs, which had been trembling with fatigue moments ago, somehow find the strength to run. Adrenaline, fear, perhaps a kind of bloodlust you didn't know you possessed, drives you forward. A French soldier, older and heavier, stumbles ahead of you. He's thrown away his weapon, discarded his shield, and is running in pure panic. You catch up to him, and without thinking, without any conscious decision, you swing your billhook at his back. The blade catches him between the shoulder blades, biting deep. He arches, screams, falls forward into the mud. You stop, breathing hard, looking down at him. He's trying to crawl away, one arm reaching forward, the other clutching at the wound in his back. You should finish him. The merciful thing would be to end his suffering quickly, but you can't bring yourself to do it. You're not a killer by nature, despite what you've just done. You turn away, leaving him bleeding in the mud, and keep running. You shake your head. Hugh's expression darkens. Took a spear in the chest during the main push. Dead before he hit the ground. Thomas had a wife and 4 children. You know them. The oldest daughter is friends with your daughter. Now Thomas is gone, and his family will have to manage without him, which probably means losing their land, which probably means destitution. Someone should tell them, you say. Should. Hugh agrees. But who and how? We don't even know when we're going home. This is the reality for common soldiers. The nobles will receive official notification of deaths. Priests will say masses for their souls. Their families will know what happened and when. But for peasants, your families will simply wait, not knowing if you're alive or dead, waiting weeks or months for any news. The afternoon is spent in a haze of exhaustion and shock. You eat whatever food you're given, hard bread and weak ale, same as always. You find a relatively clean patch of ground and sit, watching the organized chaos around you. The looting continues through the late afternoon and evening. Men are returning to camp carrying arms full of plunder. Weapons, armor, coins, anything valuable enough to carry. Some are wealthy by their standards. A good sword might represent a year's income. Others have less luck but still gather whatever they can. You eventually force yourself to join in, not because you want to rob the dead, but because practicality demands it. You move across the battlefield, trying not to look too closely at the faces of the corpses, searching for anything useful. You find a pair of boots on a dead French soldier, boots that are actually in good condition, barely worn. They're slightly too large, but that's better than too small. You take them, removing the ones you've been walking in, barely more than rags at this point, and lacing up the French soldier's footwear. They're comfortable, well made. Your feet thank you. You find a few coins in a dead man's purse. Perhaps 8 or 10 pennies, not a fortune, but enough to buy food for a week or two. You take them, ignoring the voice in your head that says this is robbery, that this money probably belonged to some peasant like yourself, who was just as much a victim of this war as you are. You find a knife with a good blade, which you add to your belt. Your own knife was lost at some point during the battle. You don't even remember when. As the sun sets, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that seem obscenely beautiful given the horrors of the day, you return to the camp area. Fires are being lit. The army is settling in for the night, though everyone knows this is likely temporary. Tomorrow or the next day you'll march again, either pursuing the remnants of the French army or heading toward your next objective. That night, sitting by a fire with Hugh and Peter and a handful of other survivors from your village, someone asks the question you've all been thinking: how many more battles until we can go home? No one has an answer. The war isn't over just because you won today. There will be more marches, more battles, more chances to die. You've survived one battle. The next one might kill you, or the one after that, or disease during the march, or an infected wound that turns gangrenous. The conversation dies, replaced by contemplative silence. Men stare into the fire, lost in their own thoughts. Some are likely replaying the battle, seeing again the faces of men they killed, hearing again the screams of the dying. Others are thinking of home, of families that seem impossibly distant, of lives that feel like they belong to other people. You lie down on the cold ground, wrapped in your threadbare blanket, and close your eyes. Sleep doesn't come easily. When it finally does, it brings nightmares, vivid, terrible dreams where you're back in the press of battle, unable to breathe, surrounded by dying men, drowning in blood and mud and horror. You wake multiple times, gasping, heart pounding, unsure for several panicked seconds where you are. Each time, reality returns slowly. You're in the camp, the battle is over, you survived. And each time, you lie back down and try again to find sleep, knowing that tomorrow will bring more of the same, more marching, more suffering, and eventually more fighting. The battle is done, but its echoes will reverberate through the rest of your life. What you saw, what you did, what you experienced, these things don't simply fade when the fighting stops. They become part of you, woven into the fabric of who you are, carried forward into whatever future you manage to survive into. Rest now. Let your mind quiet. Let the images fade just for a while. Tomorrow will come soon enough. For now, exist in this dark space between waking and sleeping, between horror remembered and horror yet to come. Part 6, The Long Road Home, returning to a world that no longer fits. Weeks have passed since the battle. The army has disbanded, released to find their own ways home. The campaign, such as it was, has concluded, not with final victory, but with the exhaustion of resources and will. The French were defeated in that one engagement, but the war continues in some abstract way that doesn't concern you anymore. Your obligation has been fulfilled. You're free to go, free. The word feels hollow. You're walking south through France, then England, retracing the route you marched months ago. But the return journey is different, lonelier, more desperate. The army isn't providing rations anymore. You're on your own, along with thousands of other disbanded soldiers, all trying to reach homes that may no longer exist. Your body has changed. You've lost perhaps 30 or 40 pounds, weight you didn't have to lose. Your clothes hang loose on a frame that's all bone and sinew. Your face is gaunt, cheekbones prominent, eyes sunken. The wound on your shoulder has healed badly, leaving a thick scar and limited mobility in that arm. Your ribs still hurt with each deep breath and probably will for the rest of your life. You're walking with Hugh and young Peter. Thomas is buried in a mass grave somewhere in France. John the carpenter died of infection 2 weeks after the battle, his fever rising until he was delirious, then unresponsive, then simply gone. Others from your village who left with you are scattered, some dead, some traveling different routes home, some you simply lost track of during the chaos of disbandment. The three of you have perhaps 4 pennies between you, barely enough for a few meals. You've eaten whatever you could find, berries, roots, stale bread begged from villages, once a rabbit that Peter managed to snare. It's not enough. You're starving slowly but certainly, burning through your body's last reserves. Your feet are in terrible shape. The boots you took from the French soldier wore out after a few weeks, and now you're walking on feet that are calloused, cracked, and bleeding. Each step is painful, but you keep walking because stopping means dying here, far from home. And at least if you keep walking, there's a chance you'll make it back. The countryside you're passing through is hostile. Villages close their doors when they see soldiers approaching. Farmers watch from fields with suspicion and fear. Everyone has heard stories of disbanded soldiers turning to banditry, and no one wants to take chances. You've been refused entry to villages, turned away from wells, watched by armed men until you're out of sight. You can't blame them. You've seen disbanded soldiers do terrible things. 2 days ago, you witnessed a group of English soldiers rob a French farmstead, taking their food, their livestock, and terrorizing the family. You didn't intervene. What could you have done? You're barely surviving yourself. The journey takes weeks. Each day is a repetition of the last. Wake cold and stiff, walk until exhausted, search for food and shelter, sleep fitfully, repeat. The only thing that keeps you moving is the knowledge that home is ahead, that every step takes you closer to Margaret and the children, to a life that you desperately need to believe still exists. Finally, after what feels like a lifetime of walking, you reach familiar territory. The villages you're passing through are known to you. The landscape has the shapes and contours of home. You're perhaps 2 days away from your own village now, close enough that you can almost convince yourself this nightmare is nearly over. But something is wrong. You can feel it before you can articulate it. A sense of displacement, of not quite fitting into the world you're returning to. The villages look the same, but you've changed so fundamentally that everything feels foreign. On the last evening before you reach home, you camp with Hugh and Peter at the edge of a forest. No one speaks much. You're all nervous about the homecoming, about what you'll find, about whether your families have survived your absence. My wife, Hugh says quietly, staring into the small fire you've built. She's a strong woman, practical, she'll have managed. She'll have kept things together. You nod, wanting to believe the same about Margaret. But you know the reality. A woman alone with children, without a man to work the fields or protect the household, survival would have been difficult. Many families of soldiers who didn't return quickly ended up losing their land, falling into debt, sometimes simply starving. Young Peter, who's been quiet for days, suddenly speaks. What if they don't recognize us? What if we've changed so much they don't know who we are? It's a strange fear, but you understand it. You've been gone for 4 or 5 months, but it feels like decades. The person who left, the farmer, the father, the man who worried about normal things like planting seasons and neighborly disputes, that person feels like a stranger. In his place is someone harder, damaged, carrying memories no normal life can accommodate. Morning comes. You rise early, too anxious to sleep longer. This is it, the day you've been walking toward for weeks. Home is perhaps 6 miles away, a few hours of walking. You part ways with Hugh and Peter at a crossroads, each heading toward your own villages. God be with you, Hugh says, embracing you briefly. And with you, you reply. Then you're walking alone the last miles before home, and your heart is pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The village appears in the distance, familiar fields surrounding familiar buildings. You see the church steeple first, then the manor house on the hill, then the scattered cottages that make up the village proper. It's harvest season. You can see people working in the fields, gathering in crops. You walk faster, limping on damaged feet, your eyes scanning for familiar faces, for your cottage, for any sign of your family. Then you see her, Margaret, walking from the well with a bucket, her movements tired but purposeful. She's thinner than you remember, her face lined with worry that wasn't there when you left. But she's alive. She's here, Margaret. Your voice comes out as a croak, throat tight with emotion. She turns, the bucket nearly slipping from her hands. For a moment, she doesn't react, and you realize Peter was right. She doesn't recognize you. You're too thin, too scarred, too changed. Then recognition floods her face. William? She drops the bucket, water sloshing onto the ground, and runs toward you. The embrace is fierce, desperate. She's crying against your chest, and you realize you're crying too. Hot tears cutting tracks through the dirt on your face. You hold her tightly, feeling her solid and real in your arms, proof that you actually made it, that you survived. I thought you were dead. She sobs. No word, no news, I thought you were dead. I'm here, you tell her. Though even as you say it, you're not sure how much of you is actually here. Something essential was left behind on that battlefield. In that press of dying men, what returned home is incomplete. The children appear, running from the cottage, shouting. They're bigger than you remember. Months of growth obvious in their faces and limbs. They crash into you, all three at once, and the weight of them, the reality of them, nearly buckles your knees. Your eldest son pulls back, staring at you with wide eyes. Papa, you're hurt. You look down at yourself, seeing what he sees. The prominent bones, the scars, the limp, the way you hold one shoulder lower than the other. I'm fine, you lie. Just tired from the journey. That night, lying beside Margaret in your own bed for the first time in months, you should feel relief, joy, gratitude. What you actually feel is displacement, a profound sense of not belonging here, in this peaceful cottage, with this life that seems to have continued without you. Margaret asks about the campaign, and you give her the barest details. We marched a long way. There was a battle, we won, then I came home. She wants more, you can tell, but she doesn't push. Perhaps she can sense that there are things you can't talk about. Memories that live in the dark spaces of your mind where words can't reach. Sleep doesn't come. You lie awake, hyper-aware of every sound. The wind through the thatch sounds too much like arrows in flight. The creak of timber sounds like men dying. When you finally drift off, the nightmares come immediately. You're back in the battle, crushed in the press of bodies, unable to breathe, surrounded by screaming and blood. You wake gasping, heart pounding, disoriented. Margaret's hand finds yours in the darkness. You're safe, she whispers. You're home, but safe is a relative term. Your body is home, but your mind is still partially on that French battlefield, stuck in those moments of horror that won't fade. The days that follow are difficult in ways you hadn't anticipated. The farm needs work. Months of neglect have taken their toll. The fields need tending, fences need mending, the pig needs slaughtering. All the normal tasks of peasant life that seemed so important before the war now feel meaningless, trivial. You try to work, but your body won't cooperate. The wound in your shoulder limits what you can do with that arm. The damaged ribs make it hard to breathe deeply when exerting yourself. The exhaustion that settled into your bones during the march has never quite left, and the memories intrude constantly. You'll be repairing a fence and suddenly you're back in the battle, watching that French soldier's face split open from your blade. You'll be feeding the chickens and suddenly you're stepping over corpses, feeling bones break under your feet. Small things startle you violently. Your son drops a pot and the clatter sends you diving for cover, heart racing before you remember where you are. The sound of your neighbor sharpening his scythe sounds too much like swords being prepared for battle, and you have to leave, have to get away from the sound before the panic overwhelms you. Margaret tries to understand, but how can she? She didn't see what you saw, didn't do what you did. The gulf between your experiences is unbridgeable. When she talks about village gossip, who married whom? Whose cow produced twins? The dispute over field boundaries. You try to care, but you can't. These concerns seem infinitely small compared to what you've witnessed. Your temper has changed. Little frustrations that you would have brushed off before now trigger disproportionate rage. Your daughter spills milk and you find yourself shouting at her with an intensity that frightens her, that frightens you. You see her crying, see Margaret gathering her protectively, and you're filled with shame. But you can't seem to control it, can't moderate your responses. Everything feels too intense, too immediate. The other veterans in the village gravitate toward each other. There's old Thomas, who fought in previous campaigns. There's Hugh, recovering from his leg wound. There's a handful of others who survived and made it home. You find yourself spending time with them, sitting outside the tavern when you can afford ale, or just sitting together in silence. These men understand in ways your family can't. They've seen the same things, carry the same memories. You don't have to explain to Hugh why the sound of the blacksmith's hammer makes you flinch. You don't have to tell old Thomas why you can't sleep at night. They know because they're living it too. But even this fellowship is bitter. You're united by trauma, bonded by shared horror, and there's no comfort in it. Only the cold recognition that you're all damaged in the same ways. Months pass. The initial relief of your return fades, replaced by the reality of living with what you've become. Margaret grows quieter, more careful around you. The children learn to stay out of your way when you're having bad days. You're becoming isolated within your own family, separated by experiences you can't share and changes you can't undo. The farm suffers. You can't work the way you used to. Physically, you're limited by injuries, but mentally you can't maintain focus on long-term planning. Plant crops for next year's harvest? Why, you might be conscripted again. The harvest might fail. Everything feels uncertain, temporary, liable to be destroyed at any moment. Your relationship with the church changes. You still attend Mass, everyone does, but the sermons about God's justice, about divine providence, ring hollow now. You've seen too much random death, too much suffering inflicted on the innocent, to believe in any neat theological framework that makes sense of it all. Father Benedict tries to help. He speaks to you after Mass one day, asks how you're managing. You give him the expected answers. Fine, Father, adjusting, grateful to be home. He looks at you with sympathetic eyes and tells you to pray for peace, to trust in God's plan. You want to ask him about God's plan for Thomas, who died screaming with a spear in his chest, about God's plan for the French soldiers you killed, who were probably just as much victims as you, about God's plan for your daughter, who now flinches when you raise your voice. But you don't. What would be the point? Years pass. You never fully recover. The physical injuries heal as much as they're going to. The shoulder remains stiff, the ribs continue to ache in cold weather, the scars fade but never disappear. The psychological wounds don't heal at all. They become part of your baseline reality, the lens through which you see everything. You become known in the village as difficult, moody, unpredictable. Children are told to leave you alone. New families who move to the village after your return don't understand why everyone treats you carefully, why they speak of you in hushed tones. Margaret ages faster than she should. The stress of managing the household, dealing with your moods, raising children in a home marked by trauma, it takes its toll. She's still there, still beside you, but the easy affection of your early years together is gone, replaced by a kind of weary companionship. Your children grow up in the shadow of your war. Your eldest son becomes quiet and careful, never raising his voice, always watching for signs of your mood. Your daughter develops anxiety, always worried about doing something wrong. Your youngest doesn't remember you from before the war and grows up knowing only this version of his father. Damaged, distant, prone to rages. On bad nights, which are more frequent than you'd like, you lie awake thinking about the men who didn't make it home. Thomas, John, countless others whose names you've forgotten but whose faces you remember perfectly. Part of you envies them. They died quickly, or at least quicker than this slow death of the spirit that continues year after year. But you keep living because that's what you do. You wake each morning despite the nightmares. You work the fields despite the pain and the pointlessness. You sit at the dinner table with your family despite the distance you feel from them. You go through the motions of living even though the enthusiasm for life died somewhere on a battlefield in France. The war finally ends, officially, with treaties and negotiations that mean nothing to you. The kings and nobles who started it will go down in history, their names remembered, their deeds recorded. You're a footnote at best, a statistic, one of thousands who fought and died or fought and survived but never truly came home. Years become decades. You grow old faster than you should, worn down by injuries and memories. Your children have children of their own. Margaret's hair goes completely gray. The village changes. New families arrive. Old ones leave. But the core of it remains the same. Sometimes on quiet evenings you sit outside your cottage and watch the sunset. In these moments you think about that morning when the bailiff knocked on your door, the morning your old life ended. You think about the man you were then, naive perhaps, certainly innocent compared to what you became. That man is long dead, killed as surely as Thomas was killed, as surely as thousands of others were killed in wars they didn't start and didn't want. The body survived, but the person inside was destroyed and rebuilt into something harder, sadder, fundamentally broken. This is the true cost of medieval warfare, not just the bodies left on battlefields, but the lives permanently altered, the families destroyed, the future stolen. Historians will record the battles, the strategies, the outcomes. They won't record this, the internal devastation, the decades of suffering that follow survival, the way war echoes through generations. You are lying in bed now, an old man, your body failing finally after decades of carrying wounds that never properly healed. Margaret is beside you, her hand in yours, and your children are gathered around, along with grandchildren you barely recognize. Father Benedict is here too, giving you last rites, blessing you for the final journey. He speaks about paradise, about reward for the faithful, about God's love embracing you. As you drift toward death, you wonder if it's true. You wonder if there's something after this. Some place where the nightmares don't reach, where the memories don't torment, where you can finally, truly rest. Your last coherent thought is of Margaret as she was when you left, young, strong, standing in the doorway of your cottage watching you walk away. In your dying mind, you walk back to her, back to that moment before everything changed, and this time you don't leave. This time you stay home. You work your fields. You live your ordinary life. But even in this final fantasy, you know it's impossible. The choice was never yours to make. The world took you and changed you and broke you, and there was never any escaping it. And then finally the long war is over. Not the war between England and France, but your war. The personal battle for survival that began the moment that knock came on your door. Rest now. Truly rest. The suffering is done. The memories are fading. The long road has finally reached its end. Let go. Breathe slowly. Feel yourself sinking into deep, peaceful sleep. No more nightmares. No more pain. Just rest. Just peace. Just the gentle darkness that welcomes you home at last. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. And may you finally find the peace that eluded you in life. Epilogue. Gentle closing. And so we reach the end of our journey through medieval warfare. Not the glorious, romanticized version, but the brutal reality experienced by ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. These stories, William's story, and the stories of countless thousands like him, are the forgotten narratives of history. They don't appear in the chronicles written by monks or the songs composed by court poets. They weren't important enough to remember individually, but collectively they matter. Every grand battle recorded in history books was built on the suffering of common soldiers who had no choice in their participation. Every medieval war painted in broad strokes of strategy and politics was experienced by real people who bled real blood, who suffered real trauma, who died real deaths. Tonight, we've walked with those forgotten soldiers. From conscription through battle to the long aftermath, we've experienced a glimpse, merely a glimpse, of what medieval warfare actually meant for those who had to live through it. If you're still awake and listening, I hope this journey has given you a new perspective on history, on warfare, on the human cost of political decisions made by people far removed from the consequences of their choices. And if you've drifted into sleep somewhere along the way, I hope your dreams are gentler than William's, peaceful and restorative. Thank you for joining me tonight on this exploration of a difficult but important piece of history. Thank you for listening, for understanding, for honoring these forgotten soldiers by learning their truths. Rest well, sleep deeply, and when you wake, remember that history is made by real people paying real prices. May we honor their memories by understanding their experiences honestly, without romance or illusion. Good night, wherever you are in the world. May your sleep be peaceful, and your dreams be kind. And may we all be grateful for the ordinary lives we live. Lives not marked by conscription, by battles, by trauma, recognizing them for the privileges they truly are. Rest now. Simply rest. Good night.